This is my homemade 2x72-inch tilting belt grinder. It has this hinge down the middle, so it can serve as either a horizontal or a vertical belt grinder. When I tilt the grinder, this table does not move. But because of its placement relative to the hinge and the placement of the attachment relative to the hinge, they stay compatible in either orientation. And this is because, as you can see, the center line of the table, the center of the contact wheel, and the hinge all form one straight line. And this is a standard that is maintained across all of the attachments and tables and jigs that I build for this machine. They're all built with the same center line as this hinge. Here I've got the platen attachment installed. I've got the same table in the same position. It still works in either orientation. So today I'm going to be building a small wheel attachment for this grinder, and it's going to be built with that same standard, so it'll still work with the same tables and the same jigs. Small wheels look like this. You can get them in steel or in rubber. The steel ones are cheaper and they last longer, but the rubber ones grind smoother. And you can get any size from 1/4 inch like this up to about 2 inch. But regardless of the size or the material, they all have these same bearings on the end, and that's designed to fit in a holder like this. And these are, of course, interchangeable. I bought this small wheel holder and a full set of small wheels from 1/4 up to 1 inch, and this 2-inch idler wheel. You'll see what that's for later. All from knifegrinderparts.com. So today's project is going to be to connect a solid tool arm like that with this small wheel holder, which needs to be mounted about right here, so it's in line with the hinge, centered side to side on the hinge, and far enough out to make the belt fit correctly. So I need to make some sort of a frame that has a jog in it to go from here down to this arm. This is 3/8 inch thick steel, and these two plates are going to be the first part of the frame that will connect that solid bar to the small wheel holder. That should be close enough. I can just hog it out with the belt grinder from there. I've got the outside of these parts finished. For this inside corner, this is really where a small wheel would come in handy. For now, I'll just have to make do with this top wheel on my platen attachment. If you noticed me using the caliper on these earlier, that was just for the fun of it. These don't actually need to be that precise. So those two plates are going to mount onto the tool arm just like that. I'll weld those on. And then the actual small wheel holder will go right here, but we need to make another piece to connect this to this. The plate that's going to connect these is a piece of 1/2 inch steel plate. It's going to be welded on top of here and extend past the end, and it's actually going to replace this middle piece. I'm just going to use these two side pieces, and of course I'll have to cut this down to width. These will just be bolted directly onto the sides. So that's the next step. I have to cut this down to the same width as this piece. I'll start by rough cutting this to about the right width first. I'm going to try to cut through this with the bandsaw. Someone suggested in a previous video you can put something under one end to kick it up on a bit of an angle. That way the blade doesn't have to drag the chip all the way through. That sounded like kind of a good idea, so I'm going to try it. Well, that worked pretty well, but now we have to get these edges parallel. If these pieces are going to be mounted directly onto them, they need to be perfectly flat, square to this face, and parallel to each other. You could just put this in a mill and cut that edge, but I don't have a mill yet, so I'm going to use the belt grinder. I'm clamping this piece of wood down to use as a fence. That way I can just feed this through here. Between each pass, loosen this handle, and then slide the table in ever so slightly. I think this side is good enough. It looks pretty nice. Well, I'm really happy with how that turned out. Very precise. Now I need to drill some holes into the side of here to bolt these on. If you look at this middle piece, these holes go all the way through. But if I do that on this part, that means I'm going to be drilling a 3/8 inch hole right here, removing all of that material from a pretty critical spot and drastically weaken this part. So in order to try to keep it as strong as possible, I'm just going to drill in a little ways. Then I'll tap those holes so that I can just use some short bolts like this and thread those right into the side. That way I have all this material down the middle left for strength. These cheap disposable calipers work great as scribing tools. So I've got a depth stop set to drill 5/8 inch deep, and I figured out that's deep enough that if I tap it with this tap, I'll have a clean thread deep enough for these bolts. In case you hadn't already caught on, these need to be quite precisely drilled, because if they're not, then they could hold this thing at an angle one way or the other, and that'll throw off the tracking. Also, I drilled this middle hole, even though I plan to only use the outside 2 holes to mount this, because I want that middle one there for mounting accessories. So let's go ahead and tap these now. Tapping that raised quite a bit of a burr on here. I probably should have countersunk it first, but I'm just going to feed it back through here and that'll knock that burr off and make it perfectly flat again. So now we're ready to weld everything together, and before I can get started on that, I want to chamfer these edges. See how these chamfers come together to form a V that I can weld in. I clamped the tool arm down on top of a couple of blocks, and that's going to give me the correct offset from the tool arm to this surface. So now I'll make sure these are flush across the end and then clamp that in place. And now I'll tack that together. Before I weld this solid, I want to at least tack this piece on, because otherwise when I weld this, these sides are going to warp. And I got to thinking before I weld this on, it would look a lot better if I would narrow it down. This can be narrowed down to where it fits flush on the sides. Where these sides mount obviously needs to be left the right width, but from there back, this can be narrowed down. Yep, definitely looks better. Since these edges are flush, they also need to be chamfered, so I have a V to weld in there. These pieces are going to help keep sparks off of the precision surfaces while I weld it. I just temporarily set it up here so you can kind of see how it goes. Because of this being centered on the hinge, the belt has to go down and under the frame. So that's what this 2-inch platen wheel is for. The next step will be to make a mount for that. The wheel is just going to be mounted from the left side only. So all I need to do is make one plate that goes on this side with a drilled and tapped hole in it for that bolt. Really quite simple. The exact shape of this really isn't important, but I just came up with something that I think will look okay. Okay, it's all reassembled, so let's put in a wheel and give it a test. Well, that seems to work. Now, you probably know a couple of the other small wheel attachment designs out there are able to grind inside of a slot like this. I'm going to be able to grind inside of a slot like that too. So I have a design for that. The deflector wheels are going to be above and below, and that's actually going to be a separate piece that can just be added on when it's needed and removed when it's not needed, because of course you're running those wheels on the grit side, so they're going to wear out a lot quicker, so you want to remove them whenever you don't need them. And since that's a separate attachment, and also since I haven't got those wheels yet, I'm going to disassemble this all and paint it now. If you just slightly loosen these two bolts, then you can skew this side a little bit, and that will adjust how it tracks. And I got my wheels in. By the way, all small wheel attachments that are able to grind inside of a slot have these deflector wheels that run on the grit side of the belt. That's the only way it's possible to grind inside a slot. Predictably, I'm already regretting my decision to buy the cheapest wheels I could find. If you find some bright red 2-inch contact wheels, maybe don't buy them. My fault, I should have seen it in the listing, but there's no crush sleeve in between the bearings. So if you put a bolt through this and tighten it down, you will destroy the bearings. These will be okay for me because I can make my own bushing for that, but if you don't have a lathe to make a bushing, then you're gonna wanna make sure you buy some wheels that already have it. Anyway, I got 2 of these. There's gonna be one below and one above, like this, and this will be what makes it possible for me to grind inside of a slot like this. They're gonna wear out quickly, which is why I wanted to buy cheap ones, but there's something else I can do to help keep them from wearing out so fast, by making them easily detachable. So that's what this accessory mount in the middle is for. Both of these wheels are just gonna be mounted on a single plate across this side, held on with one bolt. So it's gonna be very simple to just remove that one bolt, and then these will come off as one unit. It would be easiest just to make a piece like this that's straight, and then these wheels would mount here and here. However, if I really want to be able to grind into a deep slot, these wheels need to be further back, like that, which means it makes a lot more sense for this to be kind of a boomerang shape. You get the idea. So I installed this onto the attachment and I made it as straight across this end as I can. And now I'll scribe a line across this piece right where it intersects this holder side on both the top and the bottom. I clamped this piece down with 2 clamps just as a way of covering up the tapped holes. And now I'm going to weld down these 2 little tabs right along those lines that I scribed. So those plates are just there to make it register with this. That way it can't turn too much on here. If it can turn too much, then it could pinch the belt between the wheel and this top plate. Let's go ahead and assemble this whole thing with the wheels. Now these need to be spaced over quite a ways from the side like this. So to do that, I'm going to put a stack of washers on here, and then I'm going to thread a nut on. And this is actually because I didn't end up making bushings to go in between these. These wheels are going to wear out fast enough anyway, so if the bearings fail early, no big deal. It is worth noting though, I'm just making this finger tight, so it's just barely squeezing the wheel. And now when I get that threaded all the way on, I'm going to tighten this nut against the side. And there we go. In order to install this thing, you first have to put the belt on. And then this can slip right over this. Drop into place. And now we can put the wheel in like this. If you're gonna build this, I recommend you just build the attachment and build this later if you need it. Because honestly, a lot of the work you're gonna be doing doesn't really require it, and it's kind of expensive. Even though I bought the cheapest wheels, these are still like 30 bucks each. Even though I built my radius jig long before I even designed this small wheel attachment, since they have the same center line, they are compatible. Well, that's another attachment for the belt grinder complete. I am working on a set of plans for this, so I'm going to put a link in the description to my website page about the belt grinder. And from there you're going to find links to plans for the grinder and links to pages about all of the attachments. Also, for those who were waiting, I did make a set of plans for this. So if you want the contact wheel attachment plans, go to that link in the description and then click on contact wheel. You'll find plans for this. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thanks for watching.